The rolling hills of southeastern Ohio hide more than coal seams and limestone caverns. In Vinton County, where mist clings to valleys like old ghosts refusing to depart, there once stood a collection of cabins so remote that mapmakers often forgot to include them. They called it Hollow Creek, though you won't find it on any modern map. The settlement's official records were quietly removed from county archives in 1887, with only a single notation in faded ink. Site condemned by order of State Medical Board. According to surviving records, 47 individuals were documented living in Hollow Creek in 1880. By 1888, county census takers reported the area uninhabited and unsuitable for settlement. What happened to those 47 souls? The question haunted local magistrate Elijah Werner until his death in 1922, as evidenced by his private journals recently discovered in a courthouse basement. The papers concerning Hollow Creek remained sealed by direct order of Governor Foraker. Werner wrote in 1889, "I have been instructed to redirect all inquiries to the State Medical Authority in Columbus, though my letters there go unanswered. The families deserve better than to be erased from history as though they never existed." Are you brave enough to know what the state of Ohio worked so diligently to conceal? This isn't a tale of superstition or folklore. What happened at Hollow Creek wasn't attributed to curses or witchcraft. It was something far more unsettling, a cold, calculated experiment conducted in the name of progress and scientific advancement. The settlement began innocuously enough in 1821, when three brothers, Samuel, Jacob, and Matthias Stillwell, purchased 200 acres of dense woodland at a government land auction. The Stillwells were Pennsylvania Dutch farmers seeking isolation after a dispute with their former community. Within 5 years, they had constructed cabins, cleared fields, and brought their wives to the new homestead. What set Hollow Creek apart, however, was its unusual isolation. The nearest town, MacArthur, lay 15 miles away over treacherous terrain. A limestone ridge surrounded the small valley on 3 sides, with only a single narrow path providing access. The fourth side featured a creek that often flooded during spring rains, cutting off the settlement entirely for weeks at a time. The place was peculiar from the start, noted Dr. James Thornfield, county physician from 1865 to 1890. In a private letter to the Ohio Medical Society, he described his rare visits to treat injuries or illness. The woods seem unnaturally quiet there. No birds sing. Even on summer days, a chill pervades the air. The residents speak little, watching with wary eyes. I've never felt welcome, though they pay promptly in eggs and smoked meats. By the 1860s, the settlement had grown to 7 households, all descended from the original Stillwell brothers. No outsiders had joined the community. When young men reached marrying age, they would occasionally venture to neighboring counties seeking brides. More often, however, marriages occurred within the settlement itself. Cousins, wedding cousins, uncles marrying nieces. The Civil War passed without a single Hollow Creek resident enlisting or being drafted, their existence seemingly forgotten by government officials. The first troubling signs emerged in the winter of 1872, when a hunter named Thomas Reed became lost in a snowstorm and stumbled upon the settlement. The Stillwells reluctantly provided shelter until the weather cleared. What Reed witnessed during his 3-day stay disturbed him so deeply that upon returning to MacArthur, he immediately sought out Sheriff Caleb Porter. "There's something wrong with the children," Reed reported, according to Porter's log. "Some can't speak at all, just make animal sounds. Others have eyes that don't match, one blue, one brown. I saw a boy about 10 years old whose fingers were webbed together like a duck's foot. The adults treat these afflictions as normal. When I expressed concern about a young girl with a twisted spine, the mother simply said, 'That's the Stillwell way.'" Sheriff Porter, dismissing Reed as a superstitious drunk, took no action. The hunter's tale became local tavern folklore, embellished with each retelling until it lost all credibility. But Reed couldn't forget what he'd seen, especially the locked cabin at the edge of the settlement, from which he heard moaning at night. When he asked about it, his host's expressions darkened, and they claimed it was merely storage for winter provisions. "I know what I heard," Reed insisted years later. "Those weren't animal sounds. And I saw them bringing food to that cabin 3 times a day, though they claimed no one lived there. Whatever, or whoever, they kept inside, they didn't want outsiders to see it." The situation might have continued indefinitely had it not been for Abigail Stillwell, born in 1862, to Jacob Stillwell Jr. and his first cousin Rebecca. Unlike many in her family, Abigail possessed both sharp intellect and uncommon beauty. She had learned to read from an old Bible and desperately hungered for more knowledge of the outside world. In spring 1883, at age 21, Abigail convinced her father to let her accompany him on a rare trip to MacArthur for supplies. While there, she slipped away and found her way to the home of schoolteacher Mary Pembroke. What transpired between the women remains largely unknown, but Pembroke later wrote to her sister in Columbus, "The poor girl begged me for books, any books. Her thirst for knowledge was heartbreaking. I gave her my copy of Jane Eyre and promised to provide more texts when possible. She spoke of her family with both love and fear, mentioning the special ones they keep apart from others." For nearly a year, Abigail secretly corresponded with Pembroke, sending letters via a sympathetic merchant who made occasional deliveries to Hollow Creek. She documented the disturbing patterns she observed: infants born with severe deformities, mental deficiencies becoming more common with each generation, and the mysterious storage cabin where certain family members were hidden away from sight. "They believe the bloodline must remain pure," she wrote in her final letter, dated February 12, 1884. "Uncle Samuel has been keeping records for decades: births, marriages, physical traits. He calls it the family book. Last night I overheard him tell Father that Dr. Whitmore is coming from Columbus again next month. They mentioned payment for specimens. I fear they mean children, my cousins who have disappeared. They say they've gone to live with relatives elsewhere, but there are no other relatives. I think I'm in danger now. Samuel saw me near his cabin yesterday and asked what I was looking for. I don't think he believed my excuse." The letter abruptly ended there. Mary Pembroke never heard from Abigail again. When Pembroke's concerns reached Sheriff Porter, he finally agreed to investigate, partly due to increasing pressure from the county prosecutor who had taken interest in the case. On April 17, 1884, Porter assembled a small party of deputies and made the arduous journey to Hollow Creek. What they discovered would haunt the lawmen for the remainder of their lives. The settlement appeared abandoned at first glance. No smoke rose from chimneys, no livestock roamed the small pastures. As the men approached the main cluster of cabins, however, they noticed movement behind curtained windows. Sheriff Porter documented their reception in his official report. Upon announcing our presence, Samuel Stillwell emerged, appearing calm though unwelcoming. When questioned about Abigail, he claimed she had taken ill with brain fever and died 2 months prior. The family cemetery behind the largest cabin contained a fresh grave marked with her name. Porter might have accepted this explanation had Deputy William Hayes not noticed a woman watching from an attic window of Samuel's house, a woman who matched Abigail's description. When confronted, Samuel grew hostile, ordering the lawman off his property. The situation escalated quickly. Porter demanded to search the premises. Samuel responded by retrieving a shotgun. In the ensuing struggle, shots were fired, and Samuel was wounded in the shoulder. With the patriarch subdued, the officers conducted a thorough search of the settlement. What they found in the so-called storage cabin defied comprehension. 3 individuals, 2 male adolescents and 1 adult female, were confined in separate rooms. All exhibited extreme physical deformities: misshapen skulls, extra digits, malformed limbs. The woman, estimated to be in her 30s, could not speak but communicated through guttural sounds and crude gestures. According to Porter's report, she appeared to have the mental capacity of a small child, though her eyes reflected an awareness of her circumstance that was profoundly disturbing. Most shocking, however, was the discovery in Samuel Stillwell's cabin. A hidden cellar accessible only through a trapdoor beneath his bed contained a makeshift laboratory. Anatomical specimens, human organs and body parts were preserved in jars of alcohol. Detailed journals documented generations of breeding results, as Samuel clinically termed them. Carefully labeled skulls of infants and children lined the shelves. In one corner stood a locked cabinet containing correspondence with several prominent physicians from Eastern universities. And there was Abigail, not dead as claimed, but imprisoned in a windowless room adjacent to the cellar. She had been subjected to regular bloodletting, which Samuel's notes described as treatment to purge her rebellious tendencies. Despite her weakened state, she immediately identified herself to the officers and begged them to help her escape. "They're selling us," she told Porter, according to his written statement. "Not all of us, just the special ones, the mistakes as they call them. Dr. Whitmore comes twice yearly with his medical students. They pay Uncle Samuel for examination privileges and for specimens. Father opposed it at first, but the money was too tempting. They believe they're advancing science by documenting our degeneration. The raid on Hollow Creek resulted in the arrest of 5 adult male Stillwells, including the wounded Samuel. The remaining family members, 14 women, 7 men, and 16 children, were temporarily housed in MacArthur while authorities determined how to proceed. News of the discovery traveled quickly, reaching Columbus within days. What happened next demonstrated the disturbing power of scientific institutions in the late 19th century. Dr. Erasmus Whitmore, the physician implicated in Abigail's testimony, was no obscure country doctor, but a respected professor at the Ohio Medical College and advisor to Governor Foraker on public health matters. Within a week of the arrests, he arrived in MacArthur, accompanied by state officials and armed guards. The Stillwell men were transferred to his custody for medical evaluation regarding their fitness to stand trial. The remaining family members were loaded onto wagons and transported to what was described as state-supervised accommodation in Columbus. Sheriff Porter, outraged by this interference, traveled to the capital to protest. His jurisdiction had been summarily overridden, his prisoners removed without proper procedure. He found no sympathetic ears. Governor Foraker refused to meet with him. The county prosecutor, who had initially supported the investigation, now advised Porter to forget the matter entirely. "Consider the alternative," the prosecutor warned. "Do you want Vinton County to become notorious as the home of degenerate monsters? What farmer would settle here? What businessman would invest? The state is handling it appropriately and discreetly." Mary Pembroke proved more persistent than Porter. Concerned about Abigail's welfare, she made repeated inquiries to various state offices. After months of obstruction, she finally received a terse letter from the Department of Public Institutions stating that the individual known as Abigail Stillwell has been committed to the state hospital for the incurably insane at Athens, Ohio, as she poses a danger to herself and others due to delusional tendencies. Pembroke immediately traveled to Athens, determined to visit Abigail. The hospital superintendent denied any knowledge of such a patient. When Pembroke produced the official letter, he examined it briefly before claiming it must refer to another institution. No record of Abigail Stillwell appeared in any public asylum in Ohio. She had effectively vanished. Meanwhile, the scientific community buzzed with excitement over a series of papers published by Dr. Whitmore between 1885 and 1887. Titled Hereditary Degeneration in Isolated Populations, the studies detailed, without naming Hollow Creek or the Stillwells, the effects of consanguineous marriage over multiple generations. Whitmore's research won acclaim from eugenicists across America and Europe. Harvard Medical School invited him to present his findings at their annual symposium in 1886. One physician who attended that presentation, Dr. Lawrence Harrington of Philadelphia, later wrote in his private diary, "Whitmore's research subjects could only have been obtained through the most unethical means. When questioned about obtaining consent, he became evasive. The specimens he displayed, human brains, organs, even an entire preserved fetus with profound abnormalities, raised serious questions about his methods. Yet my colleagues applauded enthusiastically, requesting access to his specimens for their own studies." Dr. A. Harrington's concerns remained private. The medical establishment, eager to advance understanding of heredity and lend scientific credibility to the growing eugenics movement, asked few questions about Whitmore's research methods or his subjects' welfare. In November 1887, a small item appeared in the Columbus Dispatch reporting a fire at a state medical storage facility that had destroyed specimens and records of historical interest. No casualties were mentioned. The timing coincided with growing public scrutiny of Dr. Whitmore following allegations of financial impropriety unrelated to his research. Whether the fire was accidental or deliberately set remains unknown. The fate of the Stilwell family might have remained buried in obscured history if not for Sophia Kendall, a nurse who worked briefly at a private sanatorium outside Cleveland in 1890. The facility, funded primarily by the state medical board, housed patients whose conditions were deemed too disturbing for public institutions. Unlike most staff, Kendall maintained detailed personal journals about her experiences, having previously trained as a journalist before financial necessity led her to nursing. "The women in Ward C are never permitted visitors," she wrote in March 1890. "Most have no names, only numbers. Patient 27 appears more lucid than the others. She watches me with intelligent eyes that seem to understand everything. Yesterday, when I was alone with her, she whispered a name, Abigail Stilwell. She begged me to contact someone named Mary Pembroke in MacArthur. When Dr. Jensen entered, she immediately fell silent and assumed the vacant expression the doctors expect." Kendall, intrigued by this interaction, began paying special attention to patient 27. She noted the woman showed none of the physical abnormalities or mental deficiencies that characterized other patients. Over several weeks, Kendall earned Abigail's trust through small kindnesses, an extra blanket, a few minutes of conversation, a pencil and paper hidden beneath her mattress. Gradually, Abigail's story emerged. Following the raid on Hollow Creek, she had been separated from her family and transferred between various facilities. Initially, Dr. Whitmore had attempted to convince her to cooperate with his research, offering privileges and eventual release. When she refused, insisting on speaking to authorities about the treatment of her relatives, she was diagnosed with hereditary moral insanity and subjected to experimental treatments designed to cure her rebellious nature. "They keep us drugged most of the time," Abigail wrote in a note smuggled to Kendall. "Those who resist are subjected to cold water treatments or electrical therapy. 2 women died last month during procedures. Their bodies were taken to the basement laboratory. I've seen others brought here. My cousins, my aunts. Most don't survive the first year. The doctors claim they're helping science understand degeneration, but they're really just satisfying their curiosity about how much suffering a human can endure." Kendall, horrified by these revelations, began documenting everything: patient conditions, treatment protocols, staff conversations. She created a coded map of the facility, noting which areas were restricted and which patients were subjected to the most invasive procedures. She recorded names of visiting physicians who came to observe the Stilwell specimens, as staff commonly referred to patients from Ward C. Her opportunity came in June 1890, when she was scheduled for 3 days' leave. Instead of visiting her family as planned, Kendall traveled to MacArthur, located Mary Pembroke, and shared everything she had learned. The two women faced a difficult decision: how to expose these atrocities without endangering Abigail further. Pembroke had connections to the Cleveland Daily Herald through her brother-in-law, an editor there. Together they carefully crafted a series of articles exposing conditions at the sanatorium without specifically mentioning the Stillwell case. The first piece appeared on July 8, 1890, under the headline, "House of Horrors, Alleged Abuses at State-Funded Medical Facility." The response was swift and severe. Before the second article could be published, the sanatorium's administrators filed libel charges against the newspaper. State officials denied any knowledge of improper treatment. Dr. Whitmore, now health commissioner for the entire state, issued a statement condemning irresponsible journalism that undermines public confidence in necessary medical research. When Kendall returned to work, she was immediately terminated for unauthorized absence. Worse, she discovered that Ward C had been entirely emptied. All patients, including Abigail, had been transferred to unknown locations. Staff were instructed to say nothing about the missing women or face similar dismissal. The newspaper, facing financial ruin from the lawsuit, printed a retraction and apology. Pembroke and Kendall, now labeled as hysterical troublemakers, found themselves ostracized. Kendall's nursing career was effectively over. No reputable hospital would hire her. Pembroke was forced to resign her teaching position after parents complained about her unsuitable character. Despite these setbacks, the women continued their investigation privately. Through discreet inquiries and correspondence with sympathetic medical professionals, they traced the dispersal of the Stillwell family members to various institutions across multiple states. Some had been sent as far as California and Maryland, deliberately separated to prevent communication. Most troubling were indications that the youngest children had been placed with families connected to the eugenics movement for continued observation of developmental patterns. By 1892, their investigation revealed a disturbing truth. Of the original 47 residents of Hollow Creek, only 6 could be confirmed still living. The others had allegedly died of various natural causes: pneumonia, heart failure, infection, all conveniently untraceable. Samuel Stillwell himself, whose records had formed the foundation of Whitmore's research, reportedly hanged himself in custody before facing trial, though no death certificate was ever filed. Abigail's fate remained unknown until winter 1895, when Kendall received an anonymous letter postmarked from Athens, Ohio. Inside was a tattered page, torn from what appeared to be a patient log. A single entry was circled: Patient 27, deceased October 12, 1895. Cause: pneumonia following hydrotherapy. Body remanded to medical college per standing agreement. With this final confirmation, Kendall and Pembroke compiled all their evidence: journals, letters, maps, newspaper clippings, interview transcripts, into a comprehensive dossier. Copies were sent to newspapers in New York and Chicago, to the offices of several congressmen, and to prominent clergy known for social reform advocacy. They titled it simply, "The Hollow Creek Atrocity: Scientific Progress Without Conscience." Not a single recipient acknowledged it. No stories appeared in any newspaper. No investigations were launched. The documents seemingly vanished into a conspiracy of silence. The uncomfortable truth too damaging to too many powerful institutions. Mary Pembroke died in 1901 of tuberculosis, her final years spent in increasing poverty and isolation. Sophia Kendall lived until 1927, eventually finding work as a private nurse in rural Pennsylvania. She never spoke publicly about Hollow Creek again, but kept meticulous copies of all documentation in a locked trunk beneath her bed. In her will, she left instructions for these materials to be sealed for 50 years before being donated to the Ohio Historical Society. When the trunk was finally opened in 1977, it contained only empty folders and a single note in unfamiliar handwriting. Some histories are best forgotten. Today, if you search historical maps of Vinton County, you'll find no mention of Hollow Creek. The area where the settlement once stood is now part of Zaleski State Forest, the old foundations long reclaimed by nature. No markers indicate what happened there. No memorials honor the victims of ambition disguised as scientific progress. Yet occasionally, hikers report a strange phenomenon in a particular valley, an unnatural silence where birds refuse to sing, where the air feels unnaturally cold even on summer days. Some claim to hear whispering voices when no one is present. Others report glimpsing a woman in 19th century dress watching from between the trees, vanishing when approached. Perhaps some stories refuse to remain buried, no matter how thoroughly science and society try to erase them. Perhaps there are truths that echo across time, demanding to be acknowledged. As Dr. Harrington wrote in his final journal entry before his death in 1904, when we sacrifice humanity on the altar of knowledge, we create not enlightenment, but a deeper, more insidious darkness. One that eventually consumes not only its victims, but also those who believed themselves immune to moral consequence.